it sounds like the message that's getting across to a lot of leads is that rotating the hand is what's going to give the follows a little bit of extra space.
I lost my chin. Okay. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 24 years and I have about 26. Tonight, we are taking a look at a Jordan and Tot demo from recently. I think we're just going to be covering just some general technique things that we've been talking about amongst ourselves recently and pointing out a few things with that.
I will drop the link in a card above, who knows what site it is on YouTube,
somewhere,
to the screen share.
So I think the first thing that I want to talk about, and I'll probably have it kind of a recurring thing to talk about during this episode, is pitch. The reason I want to talk about it is because Tatiana has a very interesting look to her pitch, because she is pitching correctly, but it almost looks like she has kind of that sway back that you see with some follows, but she really doesn't.
So
it seems like
who may be new, define pitching correctly.
Right.
This is their first time on our videos.
I was getting there.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
But I wanted you to point out, can you like kind of draw like the sway back?
Yeah. So
kind of like maybe outline her line of her back and then give an example of like.
Yeah. So there's natural curvature to the spine. It looks like an S shape from the side. It curves in at the low back and it curves out at the upper back. So let me do that so we can see an S shape. Sway back is when a follow tilts their pelvis such that this area gets even more curved and compressed. Mm-hmm. So if we think of like if Tot were wearing a belt in this frame, it's tipped ever so slightly down in the front. Mm-hmm. Sway back happens when either the pelvis gets tipped down even more, so you have the butt here, and then it creates this really concave shape in the low back. Mm-hmm. Or when someone has more of a neutral pelvis like Tot, but they're really like lifting up the chest, like trying to correct for posture. Yeah. And that also creates like this kink in the low back. We don't want sway back because you will be in so much pain. If not now, later, it will come for you.
Yeah.
That's one. In my opinion, the more important one. But in dancing in general, but especially in West Coast swing, it makes it so we can't use our feet and our legs correctly if we're in sway back, because it's limiting our range of motion. Is that how you would say it, or would you say it differently?
That's one way to say it. A way that I would say it is it creates disconnect in the back. So it's really hard to connect from shoulders all the way down to the like legs. And that's the most important part, especially for follows. Like it's really important that you have shoulders and hips connected. And when you have that sway back, that tipping really disconnects that. You want to have it as smooth as you can. And there will be some curvature to it because that's, our natural spine curvature. But in general, like if you have very extreme curvature on any point of the body that you don't have on the rest of the body, it's going to be disconnected. So we want to make sure that everything is as in line as we can get it. And I wanted to point this out on top because it does almost look like she has some sway back, but she just kind of has a more natural curvature to her back, because you can see if you look at the front of her, like her hips are slightly tilted forward, but not overly so. And you can see she has pretty good posture going on the front. And typically when you have that sway back, you can see that there is a large curve on the front of the body as well.
Right. Like either this where it's lower or this where it's higher.
Yeah.
This one I see a lot when particularly follows are trying to learn about pitch and they're practicing with forward pitch. And they get their weight forward over their feet, but then they feel like they're not standing upright.
Yeah.
So they just compensate in their upper body instead of also compensating in the knees and the hips.
Yeah.
And that creates the kink in the lower back. It's a really fun thing I can do. This is what you're doing in a video analysis. I stand up and I'm like, this is how you are standing up. And I build it like a transformer from the ground up. And then their eyes go,
yeah. More or less, like if you feel like you're putting in a lot of effort to be standing, you're probably not doing it correctly.
Yeah. And just to be absolutely clear, this goes for both roles, not just follows.
Yeah. But I do tend to see it more with follows.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's because of the way we teach follows. Leaders don't get that messaging that can confuse their posture. Instead, leaders tend to get the more up, back, and down thing with their shoulders more often. Yeah. And that can create a little bit of sway back. And it also locks you up and divides your body in different ways.
Yeah. But I think it's also harder to have that sway back when you are moving backwards.
Yeah.
As like,
oh, ow, that would hurt. I just imagined it.
Yeah, right. Because I think that, follows we're moving forward more than leads. Leads are moving backwards a lot more. So I think that that's another contributing factor to why you see it more in follows than in leads, because it would be very painful for leads to do that all the time.
Yeah. And just while we're here, I want to highlight that Jordan's shoulder is relaxed.
Yeah.
His shoulder is pointing up at the ceiling, but also out in front of him. And that's okay.
Yeah. Something that a lot of both roles, but I think a lot of leads, like you were saying, is that up, back, and down. So you have that good posture, which generally most people have acceptable posture for what you need for West Coast swing. Like, even if you are more relaxed and your shoulders are slightly forward, like that's usually okay.
Yeah.
It's when you start getting this really like hunchback where you're like letting the head drop forward and from where the back is, that's when you need to adjust your posture. But it's usually that you need to adjust where the head is sitting, not so much the shoulders.
Right. And if it's like really bad in the shoulders, you also need to make sure like your hips are getting underneath you.
Yeah.
Because that will create more issues.
Yeah.
Something that might be helpful to think about is like, what is the point of good posture in West Coast swing? And there are, I would say, the three main points. One, not hurting yourself. Which I would say is the main point of anything in our dance. You shouldn't have to be in a lot of pain or uncomfortable for the majority of things in West Coast swing. Obviously, if you have injuries or disabilities, that adds complexity. But like for the average person, this dance should not hurt and it should feel comfortable to you. So that's one. Two, it's connection. So like we have good posture in order to connect with our partner so they can feel our whole body as one piece through the connection. And then third, which is kind of tied in, that is the aesthetic. It just looks better to have nice posture. And that's why we say it. And I think because of how culturally posture is treated, we tend to always think of it as an aesthetic thing, just culturally. But in dance, yes, it's aesthetic, but it's actually really important functionally first. And so if like a teacher is ever correcting your posture, think of it as a functional thing first and a aesthetic thing second. And that might help you understand what they're trying to teach you faster.
I love that he grabs her hair. So I want to talk about this again, kind of looking at the pitch that she has, um, because it does look like she is pressing forward, but she's not really, right? So a lot of follows will just like automatically be pressing so aggressively out of their back leg that they're moving themselves forward, like launching themselves forward.
Mhm.
Tot is pressing out of the back leg a little bit initially, but only so to shift the weight to the front foot, and then she sits back again. And so she's going basically from a kind of back pitch to a front and then sitting back again.
And she emphasizes that last sitting back even more by bringing her left foot
Yeah.
underneath and forward of her center ever so slightly.
Mm,
So she can really sit into it.
yeah. But had she not initially gone into that backwards pitch, right, where her weight is over the heel of the back foot, or past the heel, but in this case it's like over the back heel. If she hadn't initially gone there, she would not have been able to have as much control over waiting on Jordan because he's not leading her forward.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing a little bit of twisting, but twisting does not equal come forward and does not necessarily equal giving your follow more space.
And if we pay attention really to that handhold, it's like a perfect center counterpoint through this moment. It's only moving downwards.
Yeah.
It's not traveling towards or away from either of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much, he's not pulling it down, it's relaxing down.
Yeah.
And it's more of a result of them coming towards each other than creating them coming towards each other. The order of
Really?
operations is really important.
Yeah. Really what this is more of like a double resistance from both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because Tot is coming forward, but Jordan is too.
Right. And part of that is also like muscle memory, because this is a really common place to get led into a rock and go as a follow. But without that back pitch that Alicia was talking about, Tot would not have been able to redirect into an anchor after that rotation. While we're here, let's talk about the rock and go in Jordan's body just a little bit. So I want to pay attention to, let's talk about his arm first. So after the handhold comes down from the rotation, he's making sure to have the rope nice and short, so his elbow is by his side, which allows him to then move his body away from the handhold. It starts with both his body and his hand moving away from like his elbow point, because he is trying to get Tot to go a little bit further away from him to finish her turn and anchor. But then after that, it switches to the handhold being the center counterpoint. And you can see how he is kind of rolling in towards his hand and then anchoring back away. And I don't know, I've talked about this so many times on this show, but understanding what point in your body as a leader is not traveling through space versus which parts are to create different effects is really, really, really important. Because if you're leading a follow and your handhold is moving through space, the follow attached to the hand is going to move through space.
Yeah.
But if you want them to stay in place and maybe do some styling or mirror you or increase the connection, the handhold doesn't necessarily travel anywhere. It may go like a centimeter to an inch to encourage a follow to really tether into it, for example, or compress into it. But that's like, I'm being literal, like a centimeter or an inch. It's like not much at all. And in order to create that as a leader, you need to learn how to leave your hand in space and dance around it without the hand traveling anywhere.
Right.
And that's how you can get this relaxation moment where the handhold can come down. And it's because the handhold coming down is a result of the body movement, not creating the body movement.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to.
I was going to ask you your opinion on, because I've heard this from like multiple people, but it sounds like the message that's getting across to a lot of leads is that rotating the hand is what's going to give the follows a little bit of extra space.
I lost my chin. Okay. So, the most important part to talk about first when we think of rotating the hand, and this is relevant to both leaders and followers, because this is gender agnostic. This is a human biology. This is how the forearm works. You've got two bones in your forearm, and if you hold it like this, like you just washed your hands and you're about to perform surgery,
Yep.
The bones are parallel to each other. But if you were to then rotate this way, the bones go from this to this in order to create that twist. And a lot of us know how repetitive stress injuries at work, like working at a computer, working at a desk, carpal tunnel syndrome, like carpal tunnel in part comes from the twisting of those bones, right? And so you see things like vertical mice to put your forearm in an ergonomic position. So an ergonomic position allows you to, without effort, connect your arm to your body and be one piece, to connect with yourself and your partner. As soon as it starts getting out of ergonomic position, you're not only risking self-injury, but you're disconnecting from your partner. Because like if you were to now you're a zombie or a mummy or something like that, put your mouth in front of you, and if you were to just start tipping your thumb down and keep going, notice how it comes up into the shoulder to keep going. And where we can be where it doesn't drastically affect the shoulder, you don't have to give the shoulder, is when you're in an ergonomic position. So for both partners, it's thumbs up to thumbs out is kind of like the ergonomic sweet zone. As soon as your thumbs start coming in, like palms down, already a follow has to start disengaging their shoulders. So a follow needs to be at least at this 45. And for really strong connections, I try to give a follow their thumbs up. So my palm is up as a leader. And so that's the foundation. That is forearms 101. Now back to your question, the idea of using rotation to encourage a follow to give more weight to the connection. That happens if you established safety first and you do not go into ergonomic danger with it. So for example, if I, as a leader, have my palm facing up, so a follow can be more at like a 45, and then I take them maybe just barely to flat, but definitely not past it, that will encourage the follow to rotate. But that's rotation, not tension. You use the center counterpoint to either encourage both of you to move away from it or towards it in order to increase weight in the hand. Rotating the handhold only changes what direction the follow's body is facing. It doesn't actually ask a follow to put more weight into the connection. I feel like I was coherent. How'd I do?
No, that's good.
Okay, cool. Woo, go me. I'm swung over. Swingtacular was fantastic. But I've been like, do I have two brain cells to rub together? I know my knees don't work. So having a grand old time over here. Did you have any follow-up questions before I move on? While we're here?
Maybe just brief explanation on how to encourage that settle to move forward.
All right. So when you're using a center counterpoint to try to get the equal and opposite out the other side, you as a leader, like, so let's say this arm is the follow, this arm is the leader. I have to switch it the other way. I can't do the handhold. I'm not that flexible. Just pretend. Leader, follower. The handhold needs to not go anywhere for a basic. Can this happen while the handhold is traveling? Yes. Is it harder? Yes. But for your basic, the handhold isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So what happens as a leader is you can compress into the handhold and catch it immediately. So it's very much almost like a Newton's cradle, where let's just think of a Newton's cradle with three balls. The center ball is representing the center counterpoint, and the two outer balls are representing the leader and the follower. So the leader like releases their ball, the kinetic energy goes through the handhold, the center ball, and it happens on the other side in the follow. A lot of leaders act as if there is no center ball. And it's instead like, go, but then they don't stop it at any point. And this is why faster songs are harder for people, because you have to switch from sending a follow to catching them faster in a faster song. But when there's a center counterpoint involved, you apply pressure, the follow starts moving, but you need to make sure your hand doesn't go anywhere. So you're immediately catching them. You're only in neutral for a split second. And that's how you ask for more attention.
Perfect.
Cool. Thank you.
So talking about this little motion here of kind of rolling upwards as she's moving forward. So when Cassie and I worked with Jess, she called this a cuckoo clock. So you may have heard it referred to as that. The other way you could refer to it is kind of like releasing the head back. Same thing. So I just wanted to talk about it really fast because it requires kind of two specific pieces from a follow in order for it to look natural and for it to be done correctly. So kind of the first thing is you need the initial backwards pitch to be able to like move through and come up over, right? So you can see she's really reaching out in front of her, and that's what is allowing her to stay backwards pitched enough. So she is taking like kind of like a normal step initially, and then a really large step to keep her body backwards while she's still technically moving forwards by reaching with the foot. And then that allows kind of a little bit of an acceleration, kind of like a pull from the hand hold that allows you to accelerate up and on top of that foot that's been reaching out in front of you. You need that backwards pitch. And the other aspect is you really need to have kind of a relaxation in your connection. Like, I don't think I've seen any follows be able to do this if they are not relaxed. And there's a lot of follows that are not relaxed in their upper body when they're following.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
the handhold is basically going straight up in a relaxed kind of face loop motion. So she isn't being tethered through this turn. and that's in part what is allowing to happen. So that relaxation is not 100% on taut. It's also the conditions of the leading.
Yes. But the relaxation in terms of from her, like you need to have like movement in the upper body in order to be able to release, because you can kind of see what she's doing is she's dropping the head and kind of letting it stay back over that back foot almost. And then she's kind of letting the chest lead and kind of letting the head drag back behind her and just kind of follow through. And typically, if you aren't relaxed in the shoulders, you aren't really able to let yourself.
I just tried it with 10 shoulders.
It's weird, right?
No, it's not fun.
Yeah. So like if you are like really active in the shoulder area, you're not going to be able to relax enough in order to open up the chest to let it pull you forward. And that's what you really need to have in order to relax that neck, is to let the chest lead first. So I just wanted to talk about that really quickly because I think that it's a really lovely styling. I don't think there's not a ton of follows that I see doing this necessarily. And sometimes I do kind of see follows that do have a lot more tension try to do this, but because of the nature of you need to be relaxed and you need to have that backwards pitched, which are two things that aren't always present. Like it looks a little bit uncomfortable. So I just wanted to talk about that really fast. And also I kind of think that being able to do this is a good like signal that you are rather relaxed in your upper body and in your frame.
And then real quick, because it's a variation that I like doing, is if in this position, instead of your hips being tipped this way, if you were to tip them this way, and then start the relaxation from lower in your body, it would end up being a body roll that finishes in the head. And that's how you do that. You have to like prep yourself correctly.
Yeah. And the other thing I should say is if you are going to do this, to stay backwards pitched, right? So she's reaching out in front of her. When you're reaching as a follow or as lead and you're moving forward, it's always going to be a toe release.
So her toe is brushing the floor, and then at the last second, the toe comes up and the heel strikes the floor. The thing that's hard to demo in person, because slow motion in person is hard. But here, we can go as slow as we need to.
Yeah, so you would not be able to reach that far and land on a toe just because of the way that you need to pull the weight up over the foot. Yeah, just in general, when you are really reaching with the foot, even if you're not doing this particular movement, like if you're reaching, it's going to be a toe release because you can't like smoothly transition because the heel is closer to you, right? And so you need to go from the weight in the back of the foot that's behind all the way transition evenly to the weight to the toe in front. And you can't do that if you are going from heel to toe to heel. It doesn't, you can't do that because of the weight distribution.
All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but because it's relevant to something we talked about before, knowing where the point in your body is, it's not traveling anymore. So finishing in closed position here, Jordan sends Tot down the slot, but then his elbow stops traveling. And what happens is his arm straightens out. So his hand keeps going down the slot where his body moves away from his hand. And because they're both going at the same rate, you can even see in me doing it right now, while my elbow is going up and down, it's not traveling that way or that way. And so in closed position, the center counterpoint is the leader's right elbow. If you're not doing it that way and you're just sending the follow, they're never going to feel an end to the rope. You need to be able to counter them. And that's how you do it.
I also want to point out, I'm not going to talk about it in detail, but I wanted to point out how much Tot kind of fills out that connection in the hand on the back. Because you can see like she is kind of body rolling through, but she isn't necessarily moving out of the hand connection. She's letting it kind of release behind her a little bit, but she's letting Jordan still shape her.
Yeah,
and that's
this one is definitely more of a shape than it is a drive forward. The drive happens after one, releasing the prep.
Yeah. And you can still see that his hand is flat against her back when they kind of come out of that.
All together.
And that's how you follow shaping, is you allow your back to stay flat up against the hand that's on kind of, shoulder area or wherever that might be. That's how you follow shaping.
Yeah. Chris No Bones Jones, a Portland veteran of West Coast swing, one of his favorite patterns to lead on newer follows who are starting to get the hang of it is a send out that never sends out.
Yeah.
And like you get this hot second to step forward on one, but then he brings you right back into like a turning basic anchor enclosed. And he'll just do that over and over and over again. And I'm not going to lie, I do that sometimes when I'm leading. I'm like, is this follow going to stay in my hand? Because that teaches me so much so fast. It is actually a really brilliant road mapping tool competitively. So if anybody wants me to demo that for them, if you see me in person, I'm more than happy to. So if you want to be slightly evil as a leader, but you learn so much, because a lot of follows will just leave your hand, even though you haven't actually led them out yet. I want to highlight that looks as extreme as it does because of her hair.
Yeah.
Like if she had short hair, that would not look as violent.
No.
As it is.
Yeah, because it really, like, if you watch what's happening with the head, like her head really isn't moving all that much. And that's what looks like it's happening.
Yeah, it's like a continuous neck roll, but instead of connecting at like the shoulder neck area, they're connecting at her elbow.
Yeah. And then whatever this is.
Whatever this is. What happens when you've known each other your entire lives.
Yeah.
We just take a moment for how cute she is.
The great face.
Ooh, even that.
Yeah.
Like she's not tipping her head that far. Like there's plenty of space in between her ear and her shoulder.
Yeah.
It's the combination of her arm here and her hair that is making this look a lot more intense than it is.
And she's shaping with the body a little bit. Right. So she's reaching with one side.
Mm-hmm.
And the shaping is what's making it look more dramatic with the hair.
Yeah. And it should go without saying, but if you have short hair, as a follow. Don't try to compensate for lack of choreography with more gymnastics. That's how you hurt yourself. I'm not speaking from experience. Shut up. To lead a follow, you move the hand attached to them through space. The handhold, you're moving the handhold. If it's closed position, you're moving your hand on their back. Therefore, you are moving their back. If you are a good enough leader such that small variations in that are meaningful and trustworthy by your follow, you can do things like this, where you lead them forward, but not very much.
Yep.
So all he's doing is moving through space really slowly. And therefore the hand is moving through space really slowly. Therefore, Tot is moving through space really slowly. And they can do step together, step together, step together.
Yep.
But that isn't possible as a leader unless you have demonstrated that your connection has integrity and that the small variations in what you're doing are meaningful and safe for the follow to follow. If you have not demonstrated that, a follow, even like newer follows, will just subconsciously disengage more from an untrustworthy connection. And so you might be like, why aren't you doing this thing that I'm leading? And then you might try to do it even more exaggerated, but that will only teach them to disengage more.
Yeah.
So actually, something that I often say with leaders, if I have like given them a 180 on their connection in a lesson, I'm like, you are an entirely different leader walking out of this lesson than you were walking in. I would say, trust me and lead this way socially with the people you normally dance with for at least a month before you come back to me and complain. Because like when I know, I'd love to hear your experience with this, but when I'm dancing with a leader that I've known forever and suddenly their connection is very different, I want to follow it, but I'm tentative and I don't trust it yet. And until I know that it's consistent, they won't get all of me unlocked with this new connection for a while. Is that your experience as well?
Sometimes it kind of depends on who it is, and the level that they're at. Like, if it's somebody that already, has been around a while, knows a lot, and they just get like a tweak that makes a big difference, that's something that I will just kind of go along with, and I'll follow. But if it's somebody that doesn't know quite as much, or have as deep of an understanding, and maybe has been leading a while, but then has something drastically change about what they're being told, that I'm a little bit more cautious with. But it very much depends on the situation and who they're working with. Because if it's something that like I have been working with them on, like, that's a different story. Right. But it's situationally dependent for me, but I do know what you mean. And
yeah, because like you have to take into account the social context of the change either yourself or your partner has made in their technique. And that's why we have the joke, try this out in the wild.
Yep.
But like it can sometimes take time for your partners, and this I would say this goes for both roles, to acclimate to something different in your dancing. Like sometimes it'll be like really quick, like Alicia was saying, and other times it might take a while dancing with each other again for both of you to recalibrate with each other.
Yeah, I think there's also an aspect to it where, like, if a lead drastically changes something, if they've been dancing with a specific follow for a long time and they already kind of have this like established, like, this is how we connect, I think that if you have a follow that has very good technique, they're more likely to just go with the flow and go with the changes instead of defaulting to here's how we always connect. So
yeah,
I think it's very situational.
I would agree with that. Yeah, we're getting so philosophical tonight.
I know. I really enjoy this little part here.
It's so cute and silly because it's clearly something that they know from choreography, probably a JT swing team situation. I know they did something similar in the 2020 season. I don't know what season number that was. But it's something that is significantly harder to like lead and follow.
Yep. I love her, like, I guess we're doing this.
She's like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those Jordan taught things that's just like it's hard to lead follow that type of stuff unless you already know what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing. So this actually came up in a conversation in the open 3-for-all at Swingtacular. Like all of the 3-for-alls were absolutely fantastic, but one of them looked more choreographed than the others. And I can accept choreography in like, because I consider the 3-for-all a strictly, if it's not like if you pick your trios in advance. I don't consider choreography at a strictly competition to be okay. But if it's the kind of thing where like, yeah, you've done this choreography in the past, you didn't practice it for today and it just magically happened, you can tell the difference between you were practicing this for an hour beforehand versus you used to do that back in the day and now you're doing it again. That's hilarious. That one I'm okay with in a strictly context. But if you've been just like rote practicing patterns together, I don't know. I'm being very clear. This is my opinion. It's not necessarily a correct opinion. It's just mine. And this is with Jordan and Tot. That's why it's so funny because like it just came out of nowhere and happened to make it work. Oh, geez. All right, let's talk about these shenanigans. Also, her face right here is so funny. It's like, I did it. All right, I want to talk about this lead right here because it is one of my pet peeves following so much. Do you have a pet peeve about it too? It drives me bonkers.
Yeah.
All right, so the hand is leading Tot down the slot. Jordan is switching hands, and it appears to be that he is continuing to lead Tot down the slot. That is incorrect. Even though the hand is going in this direction, it is not intending in that direction the whole time. So if we go back to the beginning, it is intending in that direction here at the beginning. But as soon as Tot's weight is getting over that right foot and is progressing over that foot, she doesn't need to be led forward anymore. She's doing it. So as soon as Jordan switches to the right hand, first of all, he's grabbing her wrist, which is a much more secure thing. Although I will say, don't do that with someone unless you know them really well and you've established that's an okay thing to do with them. Don't make this your social habit. I would go for like a handshake hold for this pattern socially with people I don't know. So, but after he has switched to his right hand on her right wrist, he is resisting her. So he is slowing her down and he's using the muscles across his chest to do that. And when he releases that tension, and in this case, he's doing it slowly, that's what's allowing him to rotate. So if we think about this, again, from the leader's perspective, this motion, he's prepping himself to turn. And he's using Tot to counterbalance him on the other end of his arm. So what happens to me a lot as a follow is I'll get the forward, I'll get the rotation, and then this handhold will just keep pushing at me. And I'm like, where are we going? I don't want to travel that far. That's too much work. What is happening? Because it's really clear because the leader is still facing in the direction where I had been, that this is the pattern that they want. And I'm like, you're not doing it right. This isn't going to have the result that you want.
You don't know how to lead that.
And it also like really annoys me because like I know it's been a long time since Ben Morris and I danced, but he's him and similarly like Michael Kielbasa, they take advantage of how large I am. And they'll like yeet me into the stratosphere, but immediately stop me to build up tension. And then nuclear rotation.
Yep.
So much power. Great power comes great responsibility. And then following through with this pattern. So he is not releasing all of the tension in order to continue with this rotation because he needs tension in order to then lead her to progress again. So when he's stepping across and forward onto his left foot here, he is bracing against that step in order to pull his right shoulder back. And that pulling his right shoulder back is what's moving the handhold screen right and is leading taut forward and around. So just because you're seeing a leader's hand move through space doesn't mean that the intention is in that direction. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times as a leader, it's actually the opposite. It's going through space in this direction, but the weight intention is opposite of that.
Yeah, it's being resisted.
Yeah. And then we could go into the science of how this works. But instead I'm going to say do not try this at home.
Yep. I was going to say I think it would
without
take us
supervision. Thank you.
There is one more part I wanted to talk about before we get off, but I think it's still a ways forward.
Okay. Oh, how are we at an hour already? We're only halfway through this dance.
I know.
Should we do it part 2 next time? It's such a good dance.
It is. So I just wanted to talk about this because there is a slight difference in what they're doing than we normally see a 1 foot. Okay, so you see Jordan bring her up into his other hand, but he actually catches her wrist, right? Because usually we do a like palm to palm connection going up into this 1 foot. But instead of that, he's actually allowing her to press into the wrist and like the arm instead of pressing into the hand, which is less stable, right? Because you can always break at the wrist and that will disconnect things and you don't have as much power from it. But because of the speed he goes to lead her at, he's giving her something very solid to prep against. Mm-hmm. And then he catches the hand. And so that's why we're seeing such a fast turn from her, right? Because he's able to get a lot of energy from her initially.
And we have done an entire episode on 1 foot spins.
Yep.
If you have not seen that, it is, I think, our most viewed one. So just go add more views to it. It's a good one.
Yeah. Just wanted to point that out. And then the other part I wanted to point out is the kind of ending of it, right? Because we have this really high power, really tight turn initially, and then we slow it down very drastically, right? And so what's happening is Tot's going from being kind of elevated up on her toes in the standing foot, and she's getting that initial like really strong power for the turn from that wrist prep. And then she's taking it and she's breaking it in 2 ways. And by breaking, I mean like slowing it down. She's dropping the heel on the standing foot, which gives more friction to the floor and makes it harder for you to continue turning. And she's also taking the energy and dropping it down to the floor. And she's releasing her leg. And so it's making a bigger, wider shape. So when you have like you want to do faster turns, you want to keep yourself a little bit more together, like she does here initially. And then when you're wanting to slow it down, you need to widen it and drop it. And that's how she's really drastically changing the speed of it.
And I want to highlight what Jordan is doing.
Yeah.
Because instead of trying to stay ahead of her timing, he lets her retether right here. So you can see his hand kind of stops traveling through space right here. It's like right in front of his forehead.
Mm-hmm.
So that way he can tune into the pulse of her new timing. If he were to try to stay ahead of it, she would be, her hand would be going faster than her body wants to, and it would actually probably knock her over.
Yeah.
All right. I know I've talked about this before, but I think it's been a while. So refreshing everyone's memory. Or if you're new here, I just want to highlight that Tot is still screen left of Jordan, basically up and almost to count 4 of this pattern. So her head is on this side of him, which is allowing her to she's staying back pitched, and she can get some compression into his back, into her back, his arm. You become non-binary and pronouns lose all meaning. And that it's just that should be your basic. The passing happens later in the pattern than most people tend to act. But it allows for this really great contrast at the end. Oh no, I didn't create a frame. I'll fix it in post. Oh no, I found it. Okay. So that's what makes the exit have more contrast to it, because she's snappy. Yeah, it's very snappy.
Well, that's everything for today.
Yeah, let us know in the YouTube comments if you have any questions, because nobody asks us questions and we love answering them. So
we do. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I don't know what we're doing next time.
We'll figure it out.
But we do have Stan joining us again at the beginning of September.
Yes.
So look out for that. I think that'll be 2 episodes from now. 2 more.
Not that soon?
Yeah. So we will be doing that soon. So let us know if you have any questions for him, or if there's anything you want to hear him talk about while he's on with us again. Other than that, I think we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, and because we never plug our Patreon, we basically do this exact same, but we do constructive criticism at all different levels over on our Patreon. So this free stuff is to help you see the good and the awesome and the stuff you want to emulate and understand how it works the way it works. Over on Patreon, we'll talk about so you can actually see, and maybe you'll be able to see your own dancing in the videos we're critiquing. And if you're a patron, you can submit your video to be analyzed. So check that out. Awkward marketing over. Bye.